Behind the shadows of Ford's theater, a man waits. Armed. Angry. And about to commit the unthinkable. Before the fatal shot was fired, a plot was already taking shape in the shadows of Washington, D.C. The assassination of President Abraham Lincoln is one of the most tragic and defining events in American history. It happened on the evening of April 14, 1865, when the United States was on the verge of healing after 4 years of brutal civil war. However, a single, fatal gunshot at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. would alter the trajectory of the country forever. The assassination not only shocked the world but plunged the nation into an era of mourning, division, and uncertainty about its future. As the nation celebrated the near end of the Civil War, a conspiracy was unfolding in the shadows, led by John Wilkes Booth, an actor with a vendetta against Lincoln and a desire to spark chaos. This is the story of the events leading up to that fateful night, the men behind the plot, the tragic killing, and the consequences that followed. Join us as we step back in time and revisit the night that forever changed the United States. The rise of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's life is a story of perseverance, ambition, and a deep moral compass. Born on February 12, 1809, in a log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, Lincoln rose from the poorest of backgrounds to become one of the most revered figures in American history. His early years were filled with hardship, but his remarkable self-education and work ethic eventually led him to law, politics, and, ultimately, the presidency. In 1860, Lincoln was elected as the 16th President of the United States, but his victory was not met with joy by the Southern states. The issue of slavery was tearing the country apart, and Lincoln's anti-slavery stance was seen as a direct threat to the Southern way of life. The secession of Southern states followed, and the Civil War erupted. Over the next 4 years, Lincoln's leadership would be put to the ultimate test as he navigated a fractured nation, working tirelessly to preserve the Union and end slavery. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory were free. This landmark decision marked a turning point in the war and was a bold declaration of Lincoln's commitment to human equality. By 1864, with the Union forces gaining the upper hand, Lincoln was re-elected for a second term. However, the war was far from over, and while the Confederacy's defeat seemed imminent, President Lincoln's fate was sealed by a group of radical conspirators who saw his death as the only way to restore the South's honor. Let's meet John Wilkes Booth, the man behind the plot. The man who would bring about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was John Wilkes Booth, born on May 10, 1838, in Bel Air, Maryland. Booth came from a renowned acting family, and he himself was a talented actor. But as the years passed, Booth became increasingly radicalized, especially as the Civil War continued to rage. Unlike many others in the South, Booth was not just sympathetic to the Confederate cause, he was fervently opposed to Lincoln and what he stood for. He saw Lincoln as a tyrant, someone who had destroyed the Southern way of life with his insistence on abolishing slavery and maintaining the Union. Booth's political views turned him into an extremist, and over time, he began to nurture the idea of assassinating Lincoln. Booth's deep-seated belief was that by killing the president, he would strike a decisive blow to the North, and the South's honor would be avenged. Initially, Booth's plans were focused on kidnapping Lincoln to use him as a bargaining chip to secure the release of Confederate prisoners. However, as the war drew to a close and the Union's victory became inevitable, Booth's frustration and anger intensified. It was at this point that his plot evolved from a kidnapping attempt to an assassination plan. The conspiracy unfolds. John Wilkes Booth did not act alone. His plot was part of a broader conspiracy. Initially, Booth sought out other Confederate sympathizers to join his cause, believing that together they could inflict chaos on the Union leadership. Among these men were Lewis Powell, a former Confederate soldier, and George Atzerodt, a German immigrant with ties to pro-Confederate circles. The original plan was simple yet ambitious. Booth, Powell, and Atzerodt were to kidnap President Lincoln and hold him in exchange for Confederate prisoners. But as the war neared its end, Booth's focus shifted to assassination. The plan now called for Booth to kill Lincoln, Powell to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward, and Atzerodt to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson. However, the plot was full of flaws. Atzerodt, who was assigned to kill Johnson, failed to carry out his task. He panicked and fled, leaving the vice president unscathed. Powell, tasked with killing Seward, managed to attack Seward in his home but was unsuccessful in finishing the job, though Seward was badly injured. Despite these failures, Booth remained determined to follow through with his plan to kill Lincoln. The night of April 14, 1865, the President's assassination. On the evening of April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln and his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, attended a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln was looking forward to the evening as a brief respite from the burdens of war and national reconstruction. He had been under tremendous pressure throughout the Civil War, and his attendance at the theater was meant to be a moment of relaxation. Booth, having studied the schedule and layout of Ford's Theater, knew this was his moment. He had already made preparations to execute the assassination. At approximately 10:15 p.m., during a comedic scene in the play, Booth slipped into the presidential box at the theater, using a secret door that was left unlocked. Armed with a small, single-shot Derringer pistol, Booth approached Lincoln from behind and shot him in the back of the head at point-blank range. The shot reverberated through the theater, and chaos erupted. The president slumped forward, and his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, screamed in horror. Booth, undeterred by the panic around him, leapt onto the stage below, shouting "Sic semper tyrannis," Latin for "thus always to tyrants," before fleeing through the back door of the theater. However, his escape was not smooth. In his haste, he injured his leg as he jumped onto the stage. The aftermath of the president's assassination. Immediate efforts were made to save Lincoln's life. The president was quickly moved to the nearby Peterson House, where doctors frantically tried to save him. Despite their best efforts, Lincoln's wound was fatal, and he slipped into unconsciousness. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865, Abraham Lincoln passed away. News of the assassination spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through the nation. The loss of Lincoln was not just the death of a leader, but the death of a symbol of unity and hope. The nation that had fought so hard to preserve itself was now at a crossroads, with no clear leader to guide it through the Reconstruction era. The hunt for John Wilkes Booth. Following the assassination, a massive manhunt ensued to capture Booth. The government placed a bounty on his head, and detectives quickly began tracing his movements. Booth fled Washington, D.C., making his way south, hoping to escape into Confederate territory. Eventually, Booth was tracked to a farm in Virginia, where he took refuge in a barn. Union soldiers surrounded the building, and after a tense standoff, Booth was shot and killed on April 26, 1865, bringing an end to one of the most intense manhunts in American history. The legacy of Lincoln's assassination. The assassination of President Lincoln was a turning point for the United States. The nation was left reeling, not only from the loss of its leader, but also from the uncertainty about its future. Vice President Andrew Johnson assumed the presidency but lacked Lincoln's political acumen and authority, leading to political tensions and clashes with Congress. Lincoln's death cast a long shadow over the post-war period. His vision for a just and lasting peace was never fully realized, and the challenges of Reconstruction became even more contentious in his absence. The assassination also left the nation questioning the future of freedom and equality for African Americans. Despite these challenges, Lincoln's legacy endured. His leadership, vision, and commitment to justice have had a lasting impact on American society, and his influence continues to resonate through the history of the United States. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln stands as one of the most tragic and consequential events in American history. It not only marked the end of an era, but also set the stage for a turbulent future. The loss of Lincoln was a blow to the nation, but his legacy lives on, shaping the values and ideals of America to this day. The actions of John Wilkes Booth, driven by hatred and despair, irrevocably changed the course of history and left an indelible mark on the nation. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. The murder of the man who had led the nation through its bloodiest war and worked tirelessly to bring freedom to millions left an unfillable void. Lincoln's untimely death was not just the loss of a leader, but a loss of hope for a united America that could heal and move forward. The country was left in mourning, but as the years passed, Lincoln's legacy only grew stronger. His dedication to liberty, his vision for a nation free from slavery, and his unwavering commitment to preserving the Union continue to shape the United States to this day. His assassination, a cruel and senseless act, forever changed the course of American history. But even in the face of tragedy, Lincoln's words and actions remind us of the importance of justice, equality, and the fight for a better world. Though the nation mourned, the ideals he stood for would live on, an enduring beacon guiding the future generations of Americans. As we reflect on that fateful night, let us never forget the sacrifice Lincoln made, nor the countless lives lost during the Civil War. We may never know what kind of future Lincoln could have shaped, but we can honor his legacy by ensuring that the values of freedom, unity, and justice never fade. It's up to all of us to continue the work he started, to carry the torch he lit, and to strive to make the world a better place. We owe it to Lincoln, to those who fought and died for this nation, and to ourselves. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Historical Finder for more in-depth explorations of history's most pivotal moments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this tragic chapter in history. Comment below and let us know what you think. Was Lincoln's assassination the true turning point in American history? Do you believe the nation could have healed differently under his leadership? Your opinion matters to us. Thank you for watching, and as always, let's continue learning from the past, so we can better understand the world we live in today. This is Historical Finder. Subscribe now for captivating history like this.